Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to this week's episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by someone who done what most of us would love to do, and that was take early retirement. And now she's here to spread how you guys can go and chase your dreams. It's Dalene Higgins. Hey, Dalene, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lee. I'm excited to be here and share how I did it and hopefully motivate others to go for whatever their dream is.
Before we get into your story, can you just explain to people who you are and where you grew up?
Yes, I'm Dalene Higgins, grew up in the States, specifically in Utah. So if you're familiar with Utah, I'm in a valley south of Salt Lake City. We border the mountains where the snow is. So if you're a ski bum, I'm sure you've heard of it. I've lived here my entire life. I have never gone skiing. It was an expense my family just did not afford, which was fine because I really am not a fan of the cold either. And we are also home of all of the national parks, which I have not visited either. So I know it's like when we say we're going to go on vacation, we want to leave the state and we don't ever think about it's about a 4-hour drive down to all the parks for us and stuff. So it would take, some time in the trip and staying overnight. So we don't ever think of that. And my husband said, we need to do that, especially since we're now both retired, but we'll get it on there. We'll get it on there.
Before we get into the reason why you decided to retire early, can you just let people know what your career path was?
So when I was in high school, I had 2 earned internships. And so when I graduated, I worked the summer on that last internship. It came to be September and they're like, well, you're no longer a high school student. You can't be in this internship anymore. And it was a paid internship. So I'm like, oh man. So I found myself unemployed. And back then, we had the newspapers. That's where we found our jobs and stuff. So got looking for that. I was only unemployed for a few weeks, fortunately, 18 living at home. So grateful for that. But in the meantime, I came across a training experience for a dispatcher academy from our local police department. So I went to that. It was going to be a 6-week course, which I completed. I loved it. But in the middle of that, they had their records supervisor come down and she said they were hiring. And I'm like, okay, why not? I need a job, So I applied. I was part-time in their records division where I did citations, traffic accidents, arrest reports, all, you name it all. And 9 months later, I was able to start full-time with them as a detective secretary. So I provided secretarial support to the detectives. At the time, there were 6 of them, and then the captain. And I was just a baby. I was 18 and, working with all of these cases. We had murder cases, obviously rape cases, domestic violence, you name it, they were all there. And so I really grew. I mean, you think of an 18-year-old, especially in the valley we grew up, is fairly safe. Yes, we do have all crimes though, not at the level of others. But I say they were my big brothers at the time. All of those detectives, they raised me. I learned a new language. Learned a new life. And from there, so I worked in law enforcement for 32 years as a support personnel. Yeah. And so the last 15, I was at the sheriff's office and I was their finance manager, which I basically taught cops how to budget. So that was my goal, or my job. It was to help them understand how to put on paper what they knew they needed out in their field and their divisions and all of the things. So.
And what's the most? I've probably got 3 questions on this. What's the most strangest case you come across? What's the most sort of not gruesome? What was the most case that hit hard to you that you come across? And what was the weirdest case that you come across?
Okay, I'm going to go with the one that hit home first. So when I was a detective secretary, there was another secretary for our special investigative services, but we ended up pairing up together at this point in time. And we got a call. It was early morning that there had been a rape. So they were bringing her in for a statement. That's what we did. Was we took victim statements, suspect statements, witness statements. And I said, well, let me, give me the name and let me make sure I don't know her, because I was working in my hometown and I'll be okay, And so they told me the name. I'm like, nope, I don't know her. She walks in, sits down, and it hits me. I do know her. I know like everything about her, but I couldn't change. I'd already said I would do it. And so that one hit home really hard, especially when, oh, it was probably 5 years later, I found myself in a social event where she was at. And so that was probably where it would made it a little awkward, but I just expressed, I'm like, do you remember me? And just spoke to her and she said yes. So we shared, just a moment or two and it was fine. So that was the one that hit home. The weirdest I would say was the doctor who returned home. I don't remember what time of day it was. I want to say it was early morning. Found his wife with her lover, and he killed her and then killed himself. But the lover he let go. Yeah. So,
Okay.
we investigated that one and it was involved in all of that. And that was kind of weird, especially doctors, but I guess love breaks hearts of even them. And then I don't remember the case per se, but here was the strangest thing. So I don't know if you remember back in the day, and they talked about when you worked with international, right? So different countries, you had to work through Interpol. So I'd heard about Interpol. I had been working there for probably 2 or 3 years. I actually got to message Interpol to ask them about this case. But it was back with DOS. I'm going to take everybody back. I'm going to date myself, even though I was 18. I want to add that. And I had she was the supervisor over the computers in the system that we use. And I mean, we had to do it exactly or they wouldn't have received it. And so that was really just strange. I never had to do that again. I've never heard about that again. Of course, I think communications have probably changed now. It was an adventure for sure. It was 18 years of growing up. And then, like I said, they were like big brothers to me, and then they became same age brothers to me, as I got older, and they got younger because they retire a lot quicker. But it was a great, great career. I really enjoyed it.
As you worked for 32 years in law enforcement, can you see why there's a breakdown between law enforcement and communities? Being that you've been on that side and that obviously you live in a community as well.
Yes, exactly. And, there's a lot that they deal with. And I think if people understand that they're in the down and dirty of everybody's business all day long, that they come across differently. So, they have a different humor. They have a different way they just chat with you, just in, passing. But honestly, they have the biggest hearts and will do anything for anyone. Um, so when I changed the agencies and I went to be more as an accounting instead of a support for them as a secretarial, I always said, I do cops speak. I know how cops speak. I know how they think, having been there for 17 years. And so there's definitely a difference. But prior to that job, I had gone down to our finance department. So I got my degree in accounting while I was working in law enforcement. And I'm like, I'd really like to use it. So I went down there for 4 years. I was bored to tears, the pace and the environment was just so completely different. And, you're in this staunch office, nobody jokes around, nobody says this or that. Where in law enforcement, it was one of my last bosses. He said, we work hard and we play hard. And, that's the thing with them is when they are on, they are on. And that might be when you encounter them. Is that they're in this mode and they're in cop mode and they're just there and they know exactly what they need to do. And so they can come across as, maybe hard and cold, but really they're just in this mode because every single one of them at every child case, anything that involved a child or even a woman, just watching them on the back end was so, so rough. So, I just think it's this misunderstanding, but it's perception and it's, it is being on that other side, especially if you don't have experience with them to, have that continued experience and explore them and realize that they're just people doing a job just like you.
And so, as we said in the intro, you decided to take early retirement. What was the reason behind that? Because it sounded like you were in a fantastic career that you love. So, why did you decide to retire early?
Yeah. So when I changed agencies, like I said, I got there and I'm like, okay, I can do another 17 here. Well, then I was adding. So working with government, I had the option of a pension, 30 years. And I'm like, 13 years I could retire early if the ducks are lined up. Because the minute you take a pension, you got a 40% cut in pay. And so I was like, all right, I want to have that option. That was my goal. I want to have that option if I want to be there when I get there. I watched coworkers, as you get older, you get forgetful, it gets hard. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. And, I wasn't anywhere near old or anything, even when I did retire. But as I was working on getting there, I just had maxed my challenge. I am somebody who loves a challenge. I love to learn new and grow. I could do this in my sleep. I managed a $62 million budget with the help of 22 people, but I had to teach them, make sure they were on top of it, and then back the sheriff with, yeah, it's got all of the things that it needs to in it. And it just was no longer a challenge. And so I actually ended up working 32 years instead of the 30. And I would have done max at 35 because other than that, it wouldn't have been financially beneficial to me. But I did approach my boss, I told my boss, I said, hey, I'm giving you my, 2 months notice. I will retire. So you need to find a replacement, all of that. He's like, okay. And it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after that. And I said, you know what, I will stay, because he said, you didn't even stay with me one full term. And I said, it's not you, it's me, it's that type of thing. And I said, okay, here is the thing. If you give me a new challenge, if you put me over these two divisions, I will stay with you through your term. So I really just wanted a challenge. And, there's somebody already in that position, and it just, which was fine. It wasn't like they were denying me of anything. I just really felt like it was time for a change. I left at the top of my game. I left at the best I could have, as opposed to, these people don't want me here anymore. It's time to go. So that was really the reason why.
How did you find it first? Because obviously you've come from a career where you're doing something every day, and then all of a sudden you've got all this time on your hands. So was that a challenge to adapt around to that, or did you have a plan of what you was going to do as soon as you retired?
Yeah. So as I was getting there, I was like, my father retired him when he was 57. So I kind of had, observed and was aware. So as I was getting there, I said to my husband, I'm ready to retire. He says, okay. And I'm like, all right. And then I thought, what am I going to do? I'm 50. I'm too young to just hang up my hat, sit in the recliner all day and watch Netflix. So I started exploring what my hobbies were, what I could do for people. And I ended up coming across financial coaching. And so I pursued that. I got the certification and I started my business. So it gives me just enough. I can schedule about 4 or 6 hours a day, gives me something to do. It's new, it's a challenge. I'm growing and learning and supporting people, and also sharing with them, that I set a dream and I achieved it, and they can do the same thing too.
So, like you said, being a financial coach. What advice can you give people in the current climate? Because obviously the cost of living crisis across the world, the way stuff is piling up, it's a lot harder to save and want to live out your dream in early retirement with the way the world is at the moment.
Yeah, it becomes more difficult. Definitely inflation has even hit my household. Hopefully, and I am hopeful, because if you look at historically, wages will follow, hopefully sooner than later. But in the meantime, really just support yourself. If you can keep contributing to your retirement, do so. If you're not finding that, keep yourself some liquid savings, protection from emergencies, protection from those inflations, right? So that is one of the main things that can help you as inflation hits. Is if you have savings, that's where the shift comes from. And then hopefully you're able to increase your income, in a later turn and stuff. But yeah, inflation's hard. But really, I think it's also a time where you can get really focused on where your money is going. And do you value every single expense you have? If you value either early retirement, or to buy a second home, vacation home, or to take a vacation every year, if that's a greater value than some of your other expenses, then hopefully you can find that you can make that shift. And that's really with, dreaming and creating a vision, is to actually root yourself into your plan of making those changes that will fuel that dream, that will, help you get to where you want to go. When I made the change, I was like, oh my gosh, I can retire. But we also, as a family, wanted to have recreational property, all of the, toys that went with it and everything as well. My daughter was 8, still had to support her. But it gave me 2 areas of focus. I had the short-term focus. Let's, have this for fun and the balance now, and keep trying to save what I can for the future and just supporting that. And it really just kind of helped me find that normalized balance. And it's not even a 50-50. At the time you set out, your short-term goals are going to probably more quickly, more immediately, but you don't want to neglect those long-term goals either. But once you've reached those short-term goals, all of that money is then freed up and you can shift it over. So understanding kind of how that flow works and then creating your vision and kind of making it work in the same way is what will help with motivation and consistency.
And what advice would you give to people to get the balance right? Do you need to have your dream first and then build your money up to that, or do you need to have the money first to then be able to live out your dream?
Yeah, no, have your dream first. So create your dream, whatever it is, and then build the steps between that. And once you are like, okay, I need to do this, this, and this, then your money can tend to follow. So definitely make your money come last. I had a client, she came to me and she says, I want to own 100 doors, be a landlord for 100 doors by the time I'm 50. I still haven't bought my own home. I'm renting. I'm like, okay, step 1. But she was so clear on her vision that she, felt that urgency, like I've got to do this. And she set out a time frame of 50 years old. She's 43. She had 7 years to do it in. I just recently worked with her, but she was able to accomplish being able to, I think she'll be able to buy a home this spring, as opposed to a year and a half like she was originally thinking. And so, once she had the tools to fill that dream, it became very, very simple. Like she knew what she wanted. She just didn't know how to put the things in order to get there.
And building up steps, would you advise that on anyone wanting to chase their dreams? So, like you set up your own business, so some people want to become entrepreneurs at an earlier age. Would you advise that same sort of thing for just chasing your dreams in general?
Yes, yeah. So if they want to be an entrepreneur and they're young, like definitely have a good understanding of your personal money, because it's going to take a while to earn your money as an entrepreneur, and have that plan in place. But yeah, to be an entrepreneur, you can excel and, grow and learn. And then just create those little steps. Like, what does that mean? And if you want to be an entrepreneur, how is that going to feed your personal life? What is that going to create for you? Which will also make it easier to, be the entrepreneur and to create that business that you want. So they kind of feed hand in hand. The client I was sharing about, as we were wrapping up the sessions with her, and we had laid out 3, larger steps for her. And she's somebody that just loves detail. I said, okay, I want you to break each one of those steps down into 10 or 15 steps, because she's somebody that loves to just check off and keep going. Whereas somebody else might look at 10 or 15 items and go, oh my gosh, I can't do that. So finding what will motivate you within, you can create it and you can develop that. So
Um, being being your own business owner, what difficulties did you find? Because obviously you've come from working as part of a big team and having someone still oversee. I know you was pretty much in charge of the financial department. You still had the sheriff overseeing you. So now you're doing it alone. What struggles have you found?
the biggest struggle for myself was I didn't have a coworker to bounce ideas off of. That was my biggest struggle. And then the second one was marketing. Law enforcement, I had no exposure to marketing. It's just not something we did. Well, I shouldn't say that. The last couple of years, had to start marketing for people to come and apply. As that shifted and changed, people really didn't want to go into that field, which I understand. And it's definitely a scary field to go into, but it that marketing has been such another piece for me. That's where I found my most growth. But I still wish I had somebody. I try to use my husband, and he is as good as he can be with me. And sometimes he's very, very just open about it. But other times I'm like, no, I need you to give me more. And so I really do miss a coworker for that.
And what's your dreams for the future with the business and stuff?
I would love to be supporting women or couples and helping them create their dreams, and it'd be enough to just sustain me to keep moving forward. Ideally, my husband and I, in the next couple of years, want to relocate without having created any more permanent expense. Right now, our home is paid off, and we would like it to keep it that way, but we need something different for that final leg of our journey. And him and I, we call it our oasis. So we kind of know what it looks like. We don't know where or, all of that will be, but it's got to fit in with our money right now. And that's where we're kind of struggling with, should I say, because it's like we have more than enough right now. We're too young to touch some of our investments. So we're kind of in this pause mode. And I feel like life's kind of on a pause, but yet we spent some time really defining what that oasis looked like to us, what he wanted from it, what I wanted from it. We younger and we've purchased, let's see, this was our third home that we made a purchase on. You go and you look at, 5 to 10 homes and you pick out the best one of what you got, and now we're looking for something that's a little more specific, like, it has to be this and it has to look like this and it needs to have these elements, or a way to make those elements in there too, which is going to be a money piece. And so, but once we sat down and we created that vision together, like, now I'm ready to take that next step. I'm ready to start exploring all of those areas and then see how it fits in money wise. And then we'll explore the money piece. So, that's kind of how your dream and your vision kind of come to be. And you can do it step by step. So if you're somebody that's maybe still in a scarcity mode and you don't believe you're going to live for 50, 60, 70 years, really try to extend yourself at least 10 or 20 years. And what does that vision look like? And what things have you accomplished? And what do you want to have done for yourself, for your community, for your kids, whoever it may be? And then just kind of set those goals. And once you get those ideas really fleshed out in your head, it really becomes like, oh my gosh, okay, now I need to do this. And then now I need to do that. And that desire just becomes so great to take the steps that you need to do. And they all of a sudden don't seem to be as hard.
And also, for people who they've got their dream in their mind, they've planned out their steps, but there's still that final step of just pulling the trigger. What advice would you give? Because, like with this podcast, it took me 6 months from idea to actually pull the trigger to go, because I kept talking myself out of it. So, what advice would you give to someone to finally pull the trigger on their dream?
Oh, yeah. And I have hesitation in a lot of areas of my life, right? I'm a planner. I'd rather plan it instead of take action, but I think we need to really think to what is that result, and then having that kind of tie us to, all right, that result is not going to happen unless I pull the trigger. And maybe you can create, if it's starting your dream or something, you're like, okay, so I got to pull a trigger on doing a budget or something, make it as simple as you can. Make the process simple, make it easy, and really try not to, with money, it's hard, but it's try not to hang on to that outcome so much. Like, you have no control of the outcome. So do the action, do the step, see what happens, and then you have a choice, and so until you take that action, you don't know what's going to happen. And then you don't know what your choice is going to be. And then at that time, you're like, oh, okay, so I can do this better. My journey was not just a simple, 15 years journey and I retired. No, there were a lot of bumps, a lot of bumbles, definitely times where overspent, and just there were some hardships we had as well. And so, every journey is going to have its, curves left and right. And so just enjoy the journey, but you got to get started on that journey first.
Exactly. And you're a fellow podcast host as well. What's your podcast about, and why did you decide to start podcasting?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Wealthy After 40. I target the Gen Xers, and mainly we talk about any challenge, any information that will benefit those. We're, the sandwich generation. We're taking care of aging parents. We're also still raising kids. Maybe you got some adult kids who are in college. We're supporting them, helping them, right? Providing them some of those means still. And then we're becoming empty nesters as well. So anything that fits within that, I bring in, planning for retirement, all of the things. I did have an idea of the podcast for a long time as well. Like you were saying, I'm like, I should do one. That would be a lot of fun. I am typically a writer. So, I did blogging way back when. it just is like people aren't consuming content that way. I'm a reader, but I know lots of people are not readers. But I'm like, oh, that would be really fun to just share my thoughts and ideas freely. In a sense, that's what I felt, and it is. But I didn't know what steps it took, honestly, to go from step one to step, it wasn't that many 10. But so I finally found somebody to help me. And, she just kind of helped me and supported me as I went through it. It was easy. It was easy once I knew what the steps were. So sometimes not knowing those steps can be the hangups. You've got to find somebody to help you get through it. But I love my podcast. It's been weekly since April of 2023. I did take a break in December, but we're back with weekly episodes. I do solo and guest episodes.
And where can people tune in?
Yeah, any platform, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, those are the top 3 that people are listening on right now, but it's also on Overcast, Stitcher, all those other places as well.
And if people want your coaching advice, where can they find you for that?
Yeah, go and visit my website at elevatefinances.us. It has everything about me, all of my services, how to connect with me, and get in contact with me. Or if you're looking for a little bit more about what I believe and who I am, I'm over on Instagram at elevate_finances as well. So,
and what we'll do, we'll put all the links in the description below so people can get to you quicker.
awesome.
Well, we're coming to the end of the interview. It's been a fascinating conversation. But I have one last question. And now this answer does not change your life journey so far. But if you had 30 seconds with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh, if I were 13. To be more free and to not be as scared.
No, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real eye-opener. And you're welcome to come back on any time you want. So thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. It's been fun.